I stand at my brother Jason's rehearsal dinner as my mother Margaret announces to 50 wedding guests that I'm dead to them. She declares I destroyed Jason's future in a car crash 15 years ago. The room falls silent. Jason, now a successful cardiologist, watches from the head table beside his fiancée Rachel. I have carried this blame for 15 years, sacrificing everything for my family. Tonight, one question will shatter their perfect lies forever. Let me take you back 15 years to understand what really happened that October night in 2009. I was Frederick Hartwell, 20 years old junior at Connecticut State University studying civil engineering. My GPA was 3.8, and I had dreams of building bridges and skyscrapers. My younger brother Jason was 18, a high school senior with early admission to Yale Medical School. Our family lived in Westport, Connecticut, where our father, Dr. Robert Hartwell, ran a successful internal medicine practice. That Friday night, I was in my dorm room studying for a structural mechanics exam when my phone buzzed at 11:30. Jason's name flashed on the screen. His voice was slurred and panicked when I answered. "Frederick, I need you to come get me right now." "I can't drive, man. I messed up bad." "What do you mean you messed up? Where are you?" "I'm at this party in Fairfield. I took some pills and had too much to drink. Please, you have to come. I can't let Mom and Dad find out." I should have called our parents. I should have told Jason to find another ride or call a cab. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and drove the 25 miles to Fairfield in my beat-up Honda Civic. The address Jason gave me led to a sprawling colonial house where music thumped and teenagers spilled onto the front lawn. I found Jason stumbling around the backyard, his pupils dilated and his speech incoherent. But what I discovered next changed everything. Jason wasn't just drunk and high from random party drugs. He had a backpack filled with prescription bottles, oxycodone, Adderall, Xanax. The labels showed my father's medical practice, but the patient names had been scratched off. "Jason, what is this?" He grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with fear. "I owe some guys money, Frederick. Bad guys. I've been selling Dad's prescription pads to pay them back, but it's not enough. They want $15,000 by Monday, or they're going to hurt me." My stomach dropped. My little brother, the golden child destined for medical greatness, had been forging prescriptions and dealing drugs. Before I could process this revelation, 3 men approached us from the shadows. They wore leather jackets and had the cold eyes of people who solved problems with violence. "There's our boy Jason," the tallest one said. "You got our money." "I told you I need more time," Jason whimpered. "Time's up, kid. Your daddy's prescription business has been real profitable for us, but we need cash now." I stepped between them and Jason. "We're leaving, now." The man laughed. "Who's this your bodyguard? Jason owes us 15 grand. He's not going anywhere until we get paid." I had to make a split-second decision. Jason could barely stand, let alone drive. These men clearly intended harm. I grabbed Jason's car keys from his pocket and half-carried, half-dragged him toward his silver BMW in the driveway. "Get in the car," I ordered. The men followed us, shouting threats. I started the engine as Jason collapsed unconscious in the passenger seat. Through the rearview mirror, I watched the 3 dealers pile into a black SUV. They followed us as I drove frantically toward the highway. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I had never been in a situation like this. The speedometer climbed past 60 as I tried to lose them on the winding back roads. Jason's unconscious body slumped against the window, completely unaware of the danger we were in. At the intersection of Route 9 and Maple Street, I saw the green light and pressed the accelerator. I didn't see the black SUV run the red light from my left until it was too late to stop completely. I swerved hard right to avoid a direct collision, but Jason's BMW skidded sideways into the intersection. The sound of crunching metal and breaking glass filled the night air. Our car spun twice before slamming into a blue Honda minivan that had been waiting at the red light. Steam rose from both vehicles as I struggled to stay conscious. My head had struck the side window and warm blood trickled down my face. In the minivan, I could see a woman and a young girl. The woman was moving, but the child appeared unconscious. Horror washed over me as I realized innocent people had been hurt because of Jason's choices and my desperate attempt to save him. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Jason remained unconscious beside me, his breathing shallow but steady. The black SUV had disappeared into the night, leaving no trace of the men who had been pursuing us. When the paramedics arrived, they found me alert and coherent, trying to help the victims in the other vehicle. Jason appeared to be the most severely injured due to his unconscious state, though I later learned this was primarily from the drugs in his system rather than crash injuries. The woman in the minivan was Patricia Sullivan, 34 years old, a nurse at Bridgeport Hospital. Her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, had been returning from dance practice when our vehicles collided. Both were rushed to the emergency room with serious injuries that would change their lives forever. As I sat in the back of the ambulance, my head bandaged and my heart broken, I had no idea that the next few hours would set the course for 15 years of lies, sacrifice, and family betrayal. I thought I was protecting my brother from dangerous criminals. Instead, I was about to become the scapegoat for his crimes and the collateral damage for our parents' ambitions. St. Vincent's Hospital became our family's war room over the next 72 hours, while Patricia Sullivan fought for her life in the intensive care unit, and little Emma underwent emergency surgery for a traumatic brain injury. My parents, Dr. Robert and Margaret Hartwell, orchestrated a calculated cover-up that would haunt me for the next decade and a half. Jason woke up Saturday afternoon in a private room, his body mostly uninjured, but his mind clear enough to understand the magnitude of his situation. When the police came to interview him about the crash, my parents insisted on having their attorney present. Jason played the role of confused victim perfectly, claiming he couldn't remember anything from that evening. I remember Frederick picking me up from a party, but everything after that is blank, he told Detective Morrison, his voice weak and convincing. The next thing I knew, I woke up here. What Jason told me privately was entirely different. When we were alone in his hospital room Sunday morning, he broke down in tears. "Frederick, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Those guys at the party, I've been dealing for them for months. I started gambling online last year and lost everything in my trust fund. When I couldn't pay my debts, they forced me to steal prescription pads from Dad's office." I stared at my brother, trying to reconcile this confession with the Jason I thought I knew. "How long has this been going on?" 8 months, maybe longer. I kept thinking I could win the money back, but I just kept losing more. The dealers said they'd kill me if I didn't keep bringing them pills to sell. The magnitude of his deception was staggering. While our parents praised his academic achievements and early admission to Yale, Jason had been funding a gambling addiction through prescription drug theft. The golden child was a criminal, and I was the only one who knew the truth. That afternoon, our parents called a family meeting in the hospital conference room. My father sat at the head of the table in his pristine white coat, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the stress of the weekend. My mother wore her pearls and maintained the composed demeanor that had made her a fixture in Westport society circles. "Frederick," my father began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life or death decisions. "We need to discuss the situation." "You mean the fact that Jason has been forging your prescriptions and dealing drugs?" My mother's face went pale. "Lower your voice. Do you want the entire hospital to hear you?" "The police are going to investigate the crash," my father continued. "When they do, they're going to want to know why Jason was intoxicated. If they discover the prescription fraud, it will destroy not only Jason's future, but my medical license and our family's reputation." I looked back and forth between my parents, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So what are you suggesting?" "You were driving," my mother said simply. "You were the one behind the wheel when the crash occurred. That's not in dispute. The question is why." My father leaned forward. "Jason has been accepted to Yale Medical School. He's going to save lives, Frederick. He's going to make a difference in this world. You're studying engineering. You can rebuild your career. Jason can't. You want me to lie about what happened?" "We want you to tell the truth about what matters," my mother corrected. "You were driving. You crashed the car. The Sullivans were injured. Those are the facts the police need to know." Jason spoke up from his wheelchair, his voice trembling with what I thought was genuine remorse. "Frederick, I know this is asking too much, but I swear to you, I'll never touch drugs again. I'll never gamble again. I'll go to meetings, get counseling, whatever it takes, and I'll make it right with the Sullivan family. I'll use my trust fund to pay for their medical expenses and apologize personally." The trust fund Jason mentioned contained $200,000 money our grandfather had left for Jason's education and future. It seemed like adequate compensation for the harm he had caused. "If I do this," I said slowly, "Jason personally apologizes to the Sullivans and pays for their medical care. All of it. And he gets help for his addictions." "Of course," my father agreed quickly. "We'll make sure the family is taken care of. And Jason goes to counseling for gambling and substance abuse." "Absolutely," my mother added. "Whatever it takes." Jason reached for my hand, tears streaming down his face. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this right, Frederick. I promise you." Looking back, I was 20 years old and wanted desperately to believe my family would keep their word. I wanted to trust that Jason's tears were genuine and that my parents' assurances were honest. I agreed to tell the police I had been drinking at the party and made the poor decision to drive home. The official story became that Frederick Hartwell, a college junior with no prior record, had consumed alcohol at a party and crashed while driving his injured brother to the hospital. Jason Hartwell was the innocent victim who had tried to stop his brother from driving, but was too injured from an earlier fall to prevent the tragedy. I pleaded guilty to reckless driving and DUI charges. The judge sentenced me to 6 months in county jail community service and a suspended driver's license. My father's attorney portrayed me as a good kid who made a terrible mistake and expressed deep remorse for the harm caused to the Sullivan family. During my sentencing hearing, I looked toward the gallery where Patricia Sullivan sat in a wheelchair, her left arm permanently damaged by nerve injuries from the crash. Beside her, 8-year-old Emma wore a thick headband covering surgical scars from her brain injury. They both stared at me with a mixture of pain and confusion as I accepted responsibility for ruining their lives. I wanted to tell them the truth. I wanted to explain about Jason's drug dealing and the men who had been chasing us. But I'd given my word to my family, and I believed they would keep their promises. The Sullivans never received an apology from Jason. They never saw a penny from his trust fund. And Jason never got treatment for his gambling or substance abuse problems. Instead, my parents used the next 6 months while I served my sentence to perfect their version of events and begin the process of erasing the truth forever. Prison changes you in ways that textbooks and movies can't capture. 6 months in Hartford County Correctional Center taught me lessons about human nature survival and the cost of lies that no engineering program ever could. While I learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of inmates and guards, my family moved on with their lives as if I had never existed. Jason started Yale Medical School that fall as planned. My parents told everyone that Frederick had gotten involved with the wrong crowd in college and made mistakes that resulted in a tragic accident. They painted Jason as a hero who forgave his troubled brother and refused to let the trauma destroy his dreams of becoming a doctor. I was released on a cold March morning in 2010 with a duffel bag of belongings and a bus ticket back to Westport. My father picked me up at the station, and the 20-minute ride home passed in complete silence. When we arrived at our colonial house on Elm Street, my mother had prepared my favorite meal, but the gesture felt hollow. "We've told people you're taking time to get your life together," she informed me over dinner. "It's probably best if you don't mention the specifics of where you've been." My old room had been converted into my mother's craft space. I was given the guest bedroom in the basement. The message was clear: I was no longer truly part of this family. Returning to Connecticut State University proved impossible. The administration had dismissed me following my conviction, and reapplication would require a lengthy appeals process. Instead, I enrolled in community college to complete my degree requirements while working construction jobs to pay for classes. Every day, I carried guilt about Patricia and Emma Sullivan. I had promised they would receive apology and financial support that never came. Using money from my construction work, I began sending anonymous cash payments to an address I found through public records. $500 here, $1,000 there. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was all I could afford. Meanwhile, Jason thrived at Yale. His social media posts showed him at medical school, parties, studying in prestigious libraries, and receiving academic awards. Our parents shared these achievements proudly with anyone who would listen, while my own accomplishments went unnoticed. After 2 years of community college, I transferred to the University of Connecticut to finish my engineering degree. The commute from Westport took 90 minutes each way, but I couldn't afford campus housing. I studied in my basement bedroom and worked construction on weekends to pay tuition. My father occasionally mentioned job opportunities at engineering firms where his medical colleagues had connections, but these conversations always came with conditions about maintaining the family's reputation and never discussing the past. I learned to navigate social situations where people knew my name and remembered the crash, offering vague responses about learning from mistakes and moving forward. Jason graduated from Yale in 2014 and began his residency at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. His engagement to Rachel Montgomery was announced in the Hartford Courant Society section that summer. The article described Jason as a rising star in cardiothoracic surgery who overcame a traumatic car accident to pursue his dreams of saving lives. I had completed my engineering degree by then and found work with a mid-sized construction firm in New Haven. My projects included designing structural systems for office buildings and residential developments. The work was satisfying, but I lived modestly in a one-bedroom apartment, sending every spare dollar to the Sullivan family and building a savings account for the future. In 2016, I hired a private investigator to check on Patricia and Emma Sullivan. What I learned shattered any remaining illusions about my family's integrity. Patricia had been forced to leave her nursing job due to permanent nerve damage in her left arm. She worked part-time as a medical transcriptionist from home, earning a fraction of her former salary. Emma, now 14, struggled in school due to cognitive issues from her brain injury but showed remarkable resilience and artistic talent. The investigator also uncovered something that made my blood run cold. Jason had been telling people at Massachusetts General a completely different version of events from that night 15 years earlier. According to his story, Frederick had been drinking heavily due to jealousy over Jason's success and had deliberately caused the crash to harm him. Jason described himself as a victim who had forgiven his alcoholic, unstable brother and channeled his trauma into becoming a healer. This narrative had spread throughout Jason's professional circles and even to his fiancée, Rachel Montgomery. Medical colleagues viewed him as an inspirational figure who had overcome family tragedy through determination and forgiveness. Meanwhile, I was portrayed as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of addiction and sibling rivalry. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had experienced in county jail. I had sacrificed my reputation, my education, and my relationship with my family to protect Jason's future. In return, he had created an elaborate lie that painted me as a monster while elevating himself to sainthood. But the investigator uncovered one more detail that would prove crucial years later. Rachel Montgomery wasn't just the daughter of a wealthy medical device manufacturer. Her family name had appeared in police reports related to the drug dealers who had been pursuing Jason that night. Tom Montgomery, Rachel's father, had business connections to several individuals who had been investigated for prescription drug trafficking in Connecticut. I began to wonder if Jason's relationship with Rachel was as random as it appeared. The timing of their meeting shortly after Jason began his residency seemed suspicious given the Montgomery family's potential connections to Jason's past criminal activities. As Jason's wedding approached in the spring of 2017, I received an invitation that felt more like a summons. The ceremony would take place at the Westport Country Club, the same venue where our family had celebrated holidays and achievements throughout our childhood. I was listed as a groomsman, though Jason and I had barely spoken in 7 years. My parents made it clear that my attendance was expected, but my behavior would be closely monitored. I was not to mention the past, not to drink alcohol, and not to do anything that might embarrass the family or detract from Jason's special day. I agreed to attend, but I had my own plans for the wedding weekend. 15 years of carrying my family's lies had taught me patience and strategic thinking. The construction business had introduced me to investigators, lawyers, and people who understood how to gather evidence and expose the truth. As I prepared for Jason's rehearsal dinner, I carried with me documents that would finally set the record straight about that October night in 2009. The Golden Child's house of lies was about to collapse, and this time, I wouldn't be the one buried in the rubble. The Westport Country Club sparkled with white lights and autumn flowers on that crisp October evening. The rehearsal dinner was everything my parents had dreamed of: elegant, expensive, and perfectly orchestrated to showcase the Hammond family's status in Connecticut society. 50 of our family's closest friends and colleagues gathered in the club's private dining room to celebrate Jason's upcoming marriage to Rachel Montgomery. I arrived wearing my best suit, a navy blue ensemble I had purchased specifically for this occasion. As I entered the reception area, conversation stopped mid-sentence. The assembled guests knew my history, or at least the version they had been told. I was the troubled brother who had made mistakes but was attempting to rebuild his life through honest work and family support. Jason stood near the bar with his groomsmen, all of them physicians or medical students from his residency program. At 32, my brother had grown into the commanding presence our parents always knew he would become. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his smile confident, and his handshake firm as he greeted well-wishers. He wore a tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Rachel Montgomery was radiant beside him in a flowing emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair and green eyes. At 29, she possessed the refined beauty and social graces that came from growing up in wealthy Connecticut circles. Her father, Tom Montgomery, commanded attention near the head table, his silver hair and expensive suit marking him as a man accustomed to power and influence. My parents held court at the center of the room. Dr. Robert Hartwell, now 62, had aged gracefully with distinguished gray temples and the confident bearing of a successful physician. Margaret, 59, wore pearls and a classic black dress that emphasized her role as the perfect doctor's wife and pillar of the community. Frederick, my mother approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you could make it tonight. You look handsome." "Thank you for including me," I replied carefully. "Your father and I hope this evening will be a new beginning for our family. Jason is starting an important new chapter, and we want everyone to move forward together." The subtext was clear: behave yourself, don't cause problems, and don't mention the past. I nodded and accepted a glass of ginger ale from a passing waiter, making sure everyone noticed I wasn't drinking alcohol. Dinner proceeded with multiple courses and speeches from Jason's medical school friends, Rachel's sorority sisters, and family members who shared fond memories and optimistic predictions for the couple's future. I sat at a table near the back with distant cousins who made polite conversation about my work in construction management. The turning point came during dessert, when my mother rose from her chair and tapped her champagne glass with a silver knife. The room fell silent as Margaret prepared to deliver what everyone expected would be a heartfelt tribute to her son and future daughter-in-law. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Jason and Rachel," she began, her voice carrying across the elegant dining room. "As many of you know, our family has faced challenges over the years. We've experienced tragedy and heartbreak, but we've also witnessed incredible strength and forgiveness." I felt my stomach tighten as I realized where this speech was heading. 15 years ago, our lives were changed forever by a terrible car accident. My youngest son, Jason, was severely injured when his brother Frederick made the devastating decision to drink and drive. The crash left Jason with injuries that could have ended his dreams of becoming a doctor. Gasps rippled through the audience. Many guests were hearing these details for the first time, though others nodded knowingly. I remained perfectly still, my expression neutral, as my mother continued her public execution of my character. Frederick destroyed Jason's future in that car crash when he was 20 years old. An innocent family was hurt because of his selfishness and poor judgment. He spent time in prison for his crime, and rightfully so. The words hit like physical blows, but I had prepared for this moment for months. I knew my family would use Jason's wedding as an opportunity to cement their narrative and perhaps finally drive me away permanently. But tonight, Margaret's voice grew stronger. I want you all to witness the remarkable character of our son, Jason. Despite everything Frederick put him through, Jason found the strength to forgive. He recovered from his injuries through determination and faith. He became the doctor he always dreamed of being. She paused dramatically, looking directly at me with cold eyes that held no trace of maternal love. However, forgiveness has its limits. After years of trying to help Frederick rebuild his life, we've realized that some people cannot change. Some people will always bring darkness and chaos to the lives of others. Tonight, in front of all our friends and family, Robert and I are making a painful but necessary announcement. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. If Frederick is no longer our son, he destroyed Jason's life in that crash, and he has continued to bring shame to our family name. He is dead to us. We will not enable his destructive behavior any longer. The silence that followed was deafening. 50 people stared at me with a mixture of shock, pity, and judgment. Some seemed surprised by the severity of my mother's words, while others appeared satisfied that justice was finally being served. I remained seated, my hands folded calmly in my lap. This was the moment I had been waiting for 15 years. My parents had finally revealed their true character in front of witnesses who mattered to them. They had chosen cruelty over truth, image over integrity, and their golden child over justice. After what felt like an eternity, I stood slowly and looked directly at my mother. When I spoke, my voice was clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the dining room. Mom, before you finish erasing me from this family, I need to ask you something. Margaret's confident expression flickered slightly, but she maintained her composure. Frederick, please don't make this more difficult than it already is. Do you remember what Jason was supposed to give the Sullivan family 15 years ago? The effect was immediate and devastating. My mother's face drained of all color. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand before she set it down carefully on the table. The question seemed innocent enough to most of the guests, but my parents understood exactly what I was asking about. Jason's confident smile vanished completely. His face went ashen as he realized I was about to shatter the carefully constructed lies that had protected him for 15 years. Rachel looked confused, glancing back and forth between Jason and my parents as she sensed something significant was happening beneath the surface. Tom Montgomery shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his businessman's instincts telling him that danger was approaching his family's interests. I don't know what you're talking about, my mother said weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. I think you do, I replied calmly. The question isn't complicated. What was Jason supposed to give Patricia and Emma Sullivan after the crash? The murmurs began quietly and grew louder as guests sensed they were witnessing something far more complex than a simple family disownment. Some people were pulling out their phones either to record the unfolding drama or to research the Sullivan name I had just mentioned. My father stood up abruptly. Frederick, this is neither the time nor the place for this discussion. Actually, Dad, I think this is exactly the right time and place. All these people have just heard Mom's version of what happened 15 years ago. Don't you think they deserve to hear the complete story? I looked around the room at faces filled with curiosity, concern, and growing unease. The elegant rehearsal dinner had transformed into something none of them had expected, and I was just getting started. The simple question about the Sullivan family had achieved exactly what I intended. It planted a seed of doubt about the narrative my family had constructed, while revealing their guilty knowledge of promises they had broken. Everyone in that room could see that my parents knew exactly what I was talking about, despite their attempts to deny it. The tension in the dining room was suffocating as I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew a manila envelope that had been waiting 15 years for this moment. The faces around me showed everything from confusion to anticipation, but my parents and Jason looked like they were watching their world collapse in slow motion. Since my family has chosen to share their version of events so publicly, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, I think it's only fair that everyone hear the complete story. I opened the envelope and removed a stack of documents that I had organized meticulously over the past several months. Hospital records, police reports, financial statements, and photographs that would finally reveal the truth about that October night in 2009. These are the blood test results from Hartford Hospital taken the night of the crash. I began holding up the first document. Jason's blood alcohol level was 0.14, nearly twice the legal limit. But more interesting are the toxicology results showing oxycodone, Xanax, and Adderall in his system. None of these were prescribed to him. Gasps echoed through the room. Several of Jason's medical colleagues looked stunned, understanding the implications immediately. Rachel's hand went to her throat as she stared at Jason with dawning horror. "Frederick, please stop," Jason said quietly, but his voice carried no authority. "These are surveillance photos from the party that night." I continued displaying several grainy images. They showed Jason selling prescription drugs to other students. The pills came from our father's medical practice, stolen using forged prescription pads. Dr. Robert tried to interrupt, but I pressed forward relentlessly. Jason wasn't injured in the crash because he was unconscious from the drugs in his system when we hit the Sullivan family's minivan. I was driving because he had called me in a panic, being threatened by drug dealers who wanted $15,000 he owed them. I was trying to save his life. The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Tom Montgomery's face had gone red, and he was staring at Jason with undisguised fury. Rachel looked like she might faint. "The worst part," I said, my voice growing stronger, "is what happened next. My parents convinced me to take the blame to protect Jason's medical school admission and my father's medical license. They promised that Jason would apologize to the Sullivan family and use his trust fund to pay for their medical expenses. I pulled out financial records and held them high. Jason's trust fund contained $200,000. Patricia Sullivan has permanent nerve damage in her left arm and had to leave her nursing career. Emma Sullivan suffered a traumatic brain injury that affects her cognitive abilities to this day. They never received an apology, never got financial support, and never learned the truth about why their lives were destroyed." Margaret began crying silently, her perfectly applied makeup streaking down her cheeks. The assembled guests looked between my family and me with a mixture of horror and fascination. "But the story gets worse," I continued. "Over the past 15 years, Jason has been telling people a completely different version of events. According to him, I deliberately caused the crash because I was jealous of his success. He's portrayed himself as a victim who forgave his alcoholic, unstable brother." I turned toward Rachel, whose green eyes were wide with shock and confusion. "Rachel, your fiancé has told you that I was drunk and jealous that night, hasn't he? That I tried to hurt him out of spite?" She nodded, wordlessly, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "None of that is true, but I have something else to tell you that might be even more difficult to hear." The room fell silent again as I pulled out the final set of documents from my envelope. "Rachel, your real name isn't Rachel Montgomery. It's Rachel Sullivan. You're Emma Sullivan's older sister, aren't you?" The reaction was explosive. Rachel's face went white as she stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. Jason stared at her in complete bewilderment. Tom Montgomery jumped to his feet, looking ready to attack someone, though it wasn't clear who. "You were 19 and away at college the night your mother and little sister were hurt," I continued gently. "You've been planning this revenge against my family for years. You researched Jason, created a false identity, and orchestrated this entire relationship to get close to us." Rachel's composure cracked completely. Through her tears, she spoke for the first time since my revelations began. "My sister was 8 years old," she said, her voice breaking. 8 years old, and she loved to dance. After the crash, she couldn't remember her dance routines. She couldn't concentrate in school. My mother lost her career and spent years in physical therapy. She turned toward Jason with fury and heartbreak warring in her expression. "You let me believe your brother was a monster who hurt you out of jealousy. You never told me about the drugs or the gambling or the fact that you caused the crash that destroyed my family. I came here for revenge, but I stayed because I fell in love with who I thought you were." Jason tried to reach for her, but she stepped away. "Rachel, please let me explain. I was young and scared. I made terrible mistakes, but I've changed. I'm not that person anymore." "No, you're exactly that person," she shouted. "You've been lying for 15 years. You let your brother go to prison for your crimes. You never apologized to my family or helped with our medical bills. You built your entire career on a foundation of lies." Tom Montgomery's voice cut through the emotional chaos like a knife. "Jason, you piece of garbage, my daughter has been undercover for 2 years trying to gather evidence against your family. She's been working with federal investigators to expose your father's prescription fraud and your drug dealing activities. This revelation stunned even me. I had suspected Rachel's true identity, but I hadn't known about any federal investigation. The Montgomery Medical Devices Company has been cooperating with the FBI for 3 years, Tom continued. We've been investigating a prescription drug trafficking ring that connects back to that party 15 years ago. Some of the dealers who threatened you that night are still operating, and they've been using our business connections as cover for money laundering. Dr. Robert sat down heavily, his distinguished facade crumbling as the full scope of the investigation became clear. Rachel, I said gently, there's one more thing everyone should know. I pulled out the final document from my envelope. For the past 7 years, I've been sending anonymous payments to your family to help with medical expenses. It wasn't nearly enough, and it could never make up for what Jason did. But I wanted you to know that someone cared about your mother and Emma. Rachel stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. The hatred that had driven her revenge plot was mixing with confusion about the man she had blamed for so many years. The elegant rehearsal dinner had become a courtroom, where 15 years of lies, betrayal, and cover-ups were finally being exposed to the light. But the biggest revelations were yet to come, and the night was far from over. The aftermath of my revelations transformed the elegant dining room into something resembling a courtroom where 15 years of carefully constructed lies were unraveling in real time. Rachel stood frozen beside the head table, her false identity exposed, but her genuine anguish undeniable. Jason sat slumped in his chair, the golden child facade finally stripped away to reveal the frightened criminal underneath. Tom Montgomery took control of the situation with the decisive authority of someone accustomed to managing crises. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the 50 shocked guests, "I'm afraid this evening has taken an unexpected turn. For those who don't know me, I'm Tom Montgomery, Rachel's father and CEO of Montgomery Medical Devices. What you've just witnessed is the culmination of a 3-year federal investigation into prescription drug trafficking that reaches back to the night Frederick described." The guests murmured anxiously among themselves, some pulling out phones to call lawyers or spouses, others simply sitting in stunned silence. "My daughter has been working undercover with FBI agents to gather evidence about Dr. Hartwell's prescription fraud and Jason's drug dealing activities. We never intended for tonight's confrontation to happen this way, but Frederick's courage in telling the truth has accelerated our timeline significantly." Rachel found her voice again, though it trembled with exhaustion and conflicting emotions. "I graduated from Fairfield University in 2012 with a degree in criminal justice," she said, addressing the room. "I spent 3 years working for the Connecticut State Police before the FBI approached me about investigating the drug trafficking ring that hurt my family. When we learned Jason was engaged and planning a wedding, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to get close to the Hartwell family." She turned toward Jason, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I never expected to fall in love with you. That wasn't part of the plan. For 2 years, I've been torn between my mission and my feelings, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the criminal who destroyed my sister's life." Jason finally found the strength to stand, his face pale, but his expression showing the first genuine emotion I had seen from him in years. "Rachel, everything Frederick said is true. I was dealing drugs to pay gambling debts. I called him that night because I was scared and high and didn't know what else to do. When the crash happened, I was too much of a coward to tell the truth." His voice broke as he continued. "My parents convinced me that Frederick's future was less important than mine, that he could recover from a criminal record, but I couldn't. I believed them because I wanted to believe them. I let my brother go to prison for my crimes, and I've been lying about it ever since." Jacques run. Dr. Robert and Margaret sat motionless at their table, their social destruction complete. The colleagues and friends who had respected them for decades now understood that their perfect family had been built on fraud cover-ups and the sacrifice of one son to protect the other. Jason turned toward me, his eyes filled with shame and desperation. "Frederick, I know I can never make up for what I did to you or to the Sullivan family. I know saying sorry isn't enough after 15 years of lies, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make this right." Before I could respond, the dining room doors opened and 2 people entered who I hadn't expected to see. Patricia Sullivan, now 50, walked slowly with a cane due to her ongoing mobility issues from the crash. Beside her was Emma Sullivan, 23 years old and beautiful, despite the small scars that remained from her childhood surgery. The room fell completely silent as the victims of that long-ago crash confronted the family that had abandoned them. Patricia's voice was steady and clear as she addressed the assembled guests. "I'm Patricia Sullivan. 15 years ago, my daughter and I were injured in a car crash that changed our lives forever. We were told that a young man named Frederick had been drinking and driving that night. We believed that story until yesterday when Frederick contacted us and asked us to come here tonight to finally hear the apology we were promised years ago." And Emma stepped forward, her artistic talent evident in her graceful movements, despite the cognitive challenges she still faced. "I was 8 when the crash happened. I don't remember much from that night, but I remember the years afterward. The headaches, the difficulty in school, watching my mom struggle with her injuries while working multiple jobs to pay our medical bills." She looked directly at Jason, her youthful face showing remarkable strength and maturity. "Frederick has been sending us money anonymously for 7 years. We only learned it was him when he called us yesterday. He's the only member of your family who ever tried to help us, even though we thought he was the one who caused our pain." Jason walked slowly toward Patricia and Emma, his medical training evident in how he assessed Patricia's mobility limitations and Emma's subtle signs of traumatic brain injury. "Mrs. Sullivan, Emma, I'm so deeply sorry for what I did to your family. There's no excuse for my actions that night or for the lies I've told since then. I was 19 and addicted to gambling and drugs, but that doesn't justify letting Frederick take the blame for my crimes." He knelt down in front of Emma, bringing himself to her eye level. "Emma, I know I can't give you back what you lost that night. I can't undo your injuries or erase the years of struggle your family has endured, but I want to spend the rest of my life making amends. I'll pay for any medical care you need, any therapy or support services that might help you. And I'll make sure the truth about that night is told publicly so your family's name is cleared." Patricia studied Jason's face carefully, her nurse's training helping her assess the sincerity of his words. Dr. Hartwell, forgiveness is something I've struggled with for 15 years. I've been angry at Frederick for so long, blaming him for destroying our lives. Learning the truth doesn't instantly heal those wounds, but it does help me understand what really happened. She turned toward the assembled guests, her voice growing stronger. "What I've learned tonight is that lies eventually consume everyone they touch. This family chose to protect their reputation and their son's career at the expense of truth and justice. They let an innocent young man carry guilt and punishment for crimes he didn't commit." Emma spoke again, her words carrying wisdom beyond her years. "But Frederick never stopped trying to help us, even when he thought we hated him. That tells me something important about who he really is." The emotional weight of 15 years of deception, sacrifice, and pain filled the dining room as two families finally confronted the truth about that October night that had changed everything. But the healing had only just begun, and there were still consequences to be faced and amends to be made before this story could reach its resolution. The days following the rehearsal dinner brought a reckoning that stretched far beyond our family's private shame. The FBI investigation that Rachel and Tom Montgomery had been supporting moved quickly, armed with Jason's confession and financial evidence of prescription fraud. Within 72 hours, federal agents arrested Dr. Robert Hartwell at his medical practice on charges of prescription fraud, drug trafficking conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The Connecticut State Medical Board suspended my father's license pending a full investigation. His prestigious practice, built over 30 years, crumbled as patients learned about his role in enabling prescription drug trafficking. The elegant life my parents had constructed in Westport collapsed like a house of cards when the foundation of lies could no longer support its weight. Margaret filed for divorce within 2 weeks, claiming she had been unaware of the extent of her husband's crimes. But the financial records I had uncovered showed her signature on documents transferring Jason's trust fund money to investments that included Montgomery Medical Devices. Her claims of innocence were as hollow as the rest of the family's fabrications. Jason faced the most difficult choice of his life. He could have hired expensive attorneys and fought the charges, potentially escaping serious consequences due to the time that had passed. Instead, he chose accountability. He resigned from his residency program at Massachusetts General Hospital, surrendered his medical license, and pled guilty to prescription fraud charges that dated back 15 years. The medical community was shocked by the revelation that Dr. Jason Hartwell, the inspiring figure who had overcome family tragedy to become a healer, was actually a criminal who had built his career on lies and his brother's sacrifice. His fall from grace was swift and absolute, but it was also necessary for any hope of redemption. Rachel faced her own complex emotions as the investigation concluded. Her undercover mission had succeeded beyond what anyone had anticipated, but the cost to her personal life was devastating. The love she had developed for Jason was real, even though it was built on false pretenses from both sides. 3 months after the rehearsal dinner, she made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She chose to stand by Jason as he faced the consequences of his actions, but only after establishing clear conditions. He would complete addiction treatment for gambling and substance abuse. He would perform community service focused on helping victims of drunk driving and prescription drug abuse. And he would spend at least 2 years proving through consistent action that he had genuinely changed. Love isn't about accepting lies, Rachel told me during one of our difficult conversations that spring. It's about believing someone can become better than they were and supporting their growth. Jason destroyed my family 15 years ago, but he's also capable of spending the rest of his life making amends for that destruction. Her decision to give Jason a chance at redemption while holding him accountable was perhaps the most mature response any of us managed during those chaotic months. The Sullivan family's healing proved more complex than any of us had anticipated. Patricia qualified for victim compensation funds that helped address her ongoing medical needs and lost income. Emma enrolled in art therapy programs that helped her process both her childhood trauma and her family's long-held anger toward an innocent man. But the most meaningful healing came through an unexpected source. Emma's artistic talent, which had emerged during her recovery from brain injury, found expression in creating memorial pieces for families affected by drunk driving and prescription drug abuse. Her work became a powerful tool for advocacy and education, transforming her personal tragedy into a force for protecting others. I established a foundation in Emma's name using money I had saved over 15 years of modest living and careful investing. The Emma Sullivan Foundation provides support for families dealing with traumatic brain injury while advocating for honest investigation of vehicle crashes and accountability in prescription drug cases. Patricia became the foundation's first paid employee, using her nursing background to help other families navigate complex medical and legal systems. Our working relationship evolved into genuine friendship as we both learned to separate past pain from present possibilities. The most difficult relationship to rebuild was between Jason and myself. Trust destroyed over 15 years couldn't be restored through confession and apology alone. It required consistent action over time, demonstrating through behavior rather than words that genuine change was possible. Jason served 18 months in federal prison for his prescription fraud charges. During his incarceration, he completed addiction treatment programs and began working toward a master's degree in addiction counseling. His letters to me were filled with details about other inmates struggling with substance abuse and gambling problems, showing that his desire to help was developing into a genuine vocation. Rachel waited for him, visiting regularly and maintaining correspondence that focused on his growth rather than their romantic relationship. Her patience and consistency provided stability during his darkest period, but she never wavered in her expectations for accountability and change. When Jason was released, he moved into a supervised halfway house rather than returning to his former life of privilege. He found work as a counselor at a treatment center for prescription drug addiction, using his medical knowledge and personal experience to help others facing similar struggles. 2 years after his release, Jason and Rachel were married in a simple ceremony at Patricia and Emma's church in Hartford. The guest list included 20 people, close family friends who had supported them through the crisis addiction counselors who had worked with Jason, and survivors of prescription drug abuse who had become part of their extended community. I served as Jason's best man, a role that symbolized forgiveness earned rather than forgiveness granted. Our relationship remained complicated, scarred by years of lies and betrayal. But it was built on honesty for the first time since that October night in 2009. Dr. Robert Hartwell served 4 years in federal prison and emerged a broken man who had lost everything that once defined him. His relationship with his sons remained strained, though we maintained minimal contact out of basic human decency, rather than family obligation. Margaret moved to Florida, where she worked as a receptionist in a dental office and maintained the fiction that she had been an innocent victim of her husband's crimes. She never accepted responsibility for her role in the cover-up or acknowledged the harm her choices had caused to her own children. Some relationships cannot be repaired and some people cannot change. Learning to accept this truth was part of my own healing process. The most profound transformation came in my relationship with Patricia and Emma Sullivan. What began as guilt and obligation evolved into genuine friendship and mutual respect. Patricia's courage in forgiving someone who had caused her family such pain taught me about the difference between justice and vengeance. Emma's resilience and creativity showed me that healing doesn't mean forgetting or erasing scars. It means finding ways to transform pain into purpose, creating meaning from suffering, and building something beautiful from the pieces of what was broken. On the 15th anniversary of the crash, our families gathered at the intersection where our lives had collided so violently years before. The spot had been transformed into a small memorial park dedicated to road safety and prescription drug awareness. Emma's artwork formed the centerpiece, a sculpture that depicted broken pieces being reassembled into something stronger and more beautiful than the original. As we stood together in that park, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. 15 years of lies had been replaced by truth. Justice delayed had finally been served. Relationships destroyed by deception had been rebuilt on foundations of honesty and accountability. The life lesson that emerged from our family's destruction and reconstruction was both simple and profound. Truth and integrity may be costly in the short term, but lies eventually consume everyone they touch. Real love and family are built on honesty, accountability, and the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult. Sometimes the greatest act of love is holding people accountable for their actions so they can become who they're meant to be. Protecting someone from consequences doesn't help them grow. It enables them to remain broken while causing harm to others. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. It means choosing to release anger and hatred so that healing can begin for everyone involved, but forgiveness must be coupled with justice, accountability, and genuine change to be meaningful and lasting. The scars from that October night 15 years ago never completely faded. Patricia still walks with a cane. Emma still faces cognitive challenges. And our family still bears the marks of lies and betrayal. But those scars became part of a larger story about redemption, growth, and the possibility of building something beautiful from the wreckage of what was destroyed. Jason now works full-time as an addiction counselor, helping others break free from the gambling and substance abuse that nearly destroyed his life. Rachel leads victim advocacy programs that ensure families affected by crashes receive proper support and information. Patricia manages our foundation while continuing her own healing journey. Emma has become a nationally recognized artist whose work appears in hospitals and treatment centers across the country. Her pieces help other trauma survivors find hope and meaning in their recovery journeys. And I continue my work as an engineer designing buildings and infrastructure while also designing programs that support families like ours who have been affected by addiction fraud and the complicated aftermath of secrets exposed. The foundation we built from the ruins of our family's lies now helps hundreds of people each year. Traffic crash victims receive advocacy and support. Families dealing with prescription drug addiction find resources and community. Young people learn about the real consequences of gambling and substance abuse through educational programs led by people who have lived those experiences. Our story proves that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals and most devastating losses. It requires courage to tell the truth, strength to accept consequences, and wisdom to distinguish between people who can change and people who choose not to change. Most importantly, it requires understanding that forgiveness and accountability can coexist, that love sometimes means saying no to harmful behavior, and that the most beautiful victories come not from avoiding failure, but from learning to rebuild after everything falls apart. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever faced a situation where protecting someone you love required you to hold them accountable for their actions even when it was painful? How do you balance forgiveness with the need for justice and change? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and perspectives help all of us learn and grow from difficult experiences. Please like this video. If our family story resonated with you, subscribe for more content about healing and redemption. And share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding that truth, however painful, is always better than the most beautiful lie. Thank you for taking this journey with me. May you find the courage to choose truth over comfort, healing over convenience, and love that's strong enough to demand the best from the people who matter most to you. The intersection where our lives collided 15 years ago is now a place of beauty and remembrance. But more importantly, it's a reminder that even the most devastating crashes can become turning points towards something better if we're brave enough to face the truth and work toward genuine healing.